Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the New Orleans Humanist Perspective. My name is Charlotte Klasson, President of the Board of Directors for the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, which is the sponsor of this program, and I will be your host for today's show. If you would like to know more about NOSHA, please go to our website, www.nosha.info, and you will find out more about our upcoming events and activities. First, let me introduce my guest. His name is Dan Meden, and he moved from Iowa to New Orleans in 2017 for a job as a biologist with the federal government working on environmental support for civil works projects, including beneficial use of dredged materials from federal channels to address coastal land loss. Some of his hobbies include traveling, gaming with friends, hiking, reading scientific literature, and attending music concerts and festivals. He has also visited over 45 different countries. So welcome, Dan Meden, to our show. We are going to be talking about an experience you had being in the Peace Corps. And why don't you just start out telling us what got you interested in pursuing the Peace Corps service and when you started?
So I got into the Peace Corps actually kind of going to a career day going for my undergraduate at Augustana College in Illinois. And there was a table set up with different flyers and things, and I thought, after graduating, this might be something I'd want to pursue. And actually, the Peace Corps caters to a lot of people who are just getting out of college. So I thought, maybe this is something I want to try. And after Peace Corps service, you get a lot of good professional experience that can translate into a career later on. So I put in an application over in June of 2011, and it took about a year for me to actually get accepted because the screening process, as well as all the paperwork you have to do, is very in-depth. So you have to go get vaccinations, go through kind of like a background check, but it's a very thorough one.
Oh, okay. Well, what are some of the goals of the Peace Corps program, and what ways did you meet them? How did you fit that?
So Peace Corps was actually started in March of 1961 under President John F. Kennedy, and it was one of his first acts actually in the presidency was to start this program and to have trained Americans serving in other developing countries and to use skills that can help others develop solutions to problems, and also to help them with areas in health, agriculture, and also professional skills in businesses. So,
oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you, I believe, just if we could touch on that, you just became a teacher. Is that what most Peace Corps people actually do? They teach when they go, or they can do many things?
It was interesting because there was only one actual volunteer in my group who had professional teaching experience. So it was kind of, we learned the skills as a teacher during our training, because service in Peace Corps is about 2 years, but there's also 3 months of training that you must complete prior to being sworn in as a volunteer. And the training that you get consists of a cultural training to help you learn what are some of the norms in your community, what are some of the traditions, to kind of give you a background on that.
So you understand the culture that you're going into. Mm-hmm. I see. Okay, so this was between this was during your college career or between two different college periods? For
Yeah,
you?
this was after getting my bachelor's degree in biology and between going for my master's. So it was kind of in that period.
I see. Okay. Well, if someone was interested in becoming a Peace Corps volunteer, what would be a few tips that would help them get started?
I think it's really the actual getting it set up was going through my background in volunteering, because I was in Boy Scouts, and I think my history in Boy Scouts is what led me to also thinking about Peace Corps, because it used a lot of the same leadership skills and a lot of the community service that I did from scouting, like highway cleanups, going to different events to support that. And I think being able to hone in on your skills in leadership and things that would apply to the particular Peace Corps program you're looking into, whether it's a health volunteer, in agriculture, just kind of specializing it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it helps someone kind of bring out some of their strengths and maybe help them find what their weaknesses are and how they can improve upon that.
Exactly.
Right, in those particular fields. And was yours in a health, like biology background, or was it, you mentioned like agriculture, health, were you in a slot like that?
Yeah, my college career was not really into the health background. I didn't have any medical background. It was more of a general liberal arts study of biology. And I actually did a lot of conservation kind of work, making bat houses and
so
helping a professor on
environmental issues and things. Oh, okay. Right. Well, I know you brought something that I didn't know if you wanted to talk about it, just as far as since you taught, if you'd just like to show us your...
So when I was in Peace Corps, we had very limited supplies for making teaching aids. And one thing I came up with was this biology bingo. So different terms that we'd learn through the day, I would put on here, and at the end of the day, I would give the definition out to one of these terms, and they'd have to match it with the term on the bingo sheet. And so that was a way of
to help them kind of try different things and then find bingo because they would have it right.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, that's just wonderful. So, and that was just your invention for your teaching classrooms. Okay. Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about it? You were in Uganda. So can you tell us a little bit about the living conditions? I know we have some photos that you might want to refer to and explain as we go along. So just we can bring those up and you can talk about the experience that you had with that.
Yeah, the living conditions in Uganda were actually, it was a bit austere, to put it lightly. I mean, where I was actually out in the countryside in eastern Uganda. So we had volunteers who lived closer to the capital down in the southern part who had more access to what we'd have here in the U.S. Running water, electricity, and actually I didn't have any in my service. This picture up here is me down in Soroti, which was the largest city to my site, and so this was kind of where I would restock on groceries, go to the internet cafe to kind of de-stress and get my work done.
Yeah. Okay. And there was a photograph of you we'll just go through them. I know there was one that that was showing you in the jungles. This is one of your classrooms, I bet, right?
Yes.
Biology. Okay.
So I was giving an anatomy lesson, and I similarly made a visual aid showing the human skeleton using one of these rice bags that I made the bingo sheet with, and put my art skills to use to help.
That was very good.
And then this is my class. I was teaching 2 levels of biology at the sophomore and junior level in the high school system in Uganda. And this was kind of near the conclusion of my service. I wanted to have a chance to share it with my students.
Right. Okay. Wonderful. And this one right here.
And that picture was one of the greatest highlights of my Peace Corps service, was getting to trek mountain gorillas down in Bwindi Impenetrable Forest in Uganda.
Oh, my goodness.
I did that for my 27th birthday celebration.
That is truly wonderful. I swear, I know there are probably many people who will see this who, we see this on different scientific channels, and to be able to actually experience it must be wonderful. That is really special. Oh, and the landscape there.
And that landscape is the farmland leading to my high school. This was kind of the the teachers all took care of this, and we'd have cattle and oxen going through, pretty much running the plows there. And so
okay.
in the morning you'd
so
see
farmland that you would see a lot. Okay. Were there a lot of any people who stand out as very memorable to your experience?
The community in all was actually very supportive when I got there. My head teacher helped kind of introduce me to the teaching staff and kind of help integrate me in the community. And when I was there, I was actually living at a Catholic parish. They had like a walled kind of facility that I was living in, and had almost like a studio apartment, was what I was stationed in.
Mm-hmm.
And they helped. I actually hired the cook that the priest used to help me with preparing some of my meals when I was there. Similarly, some volunteers, they don't like doing all the cleaning, so they'd hire someone to help with that. So I made friends from the school and also from the surrounding community.
Right. So you became a part of your life. So they stand out as
right.
almost like having family.
Yeah.
I guess who were there. What do you miss most about Uganda in terms of like obviously coming back? You probably have a lot of great memories that and being a very unique travel experience. So what do you miss from that?
I miss a lot of the traveling experiences. I had so many opportunities during my teacher breaks to go on safaris and to go out and travel. And besides going to see the mountain gorillas, I also got to go to the Serengeti with some Peace Corps volunteers.
Oh, okay.
We coordinated some travel experiences.
Right.
And the food was incredible. I felt like I was eating so much healthier than when I was back in the U.S.
Really? I was going to
organic.
ask you what kind of food, because if you did hire someone to help you, you probably had to learn about the way things were done and
Right.
what foods you could use that would be economical and healthy. So tell us about that. How did you see it as healthier?
The food was all pretty much was grown out in the fields, and there wasn't any chemicals or any kind of things to promote growth of those. It was all what was there.
It was just the natural growth. Okay. Whereas I guess we have a very
a little more industrialized.
Yeah,
right.
where it's being pushed and everything. Okay.
Yeah.
What would be a staple food for a standard dinner? If I'm not drawing on your memory
right.
too much, just some one or two things that stood out as you had it a lot.
Mm-hmm. So during school days, we'd have what was called posho, which was a mix of cornmeal and cassava flour, and they make like a very thick porridge out of it, and we'd have it served with either like goat meat, pig pieces that are cut up, and red beans. That would be our common meal during the day.
Oh, okay. So not just a vegetarian only.
And
so
we'd sometimes have
protein
eggplant too, and some other kind of vegetables to go along with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever participate in like the gardening part of it, like having a garden the way we might have a community garden here? Did that happen for them, or was it a very spread out agricultural kind of thing?
I didn't really try my hand too much in the farming part. Actually, my parents sent me some seeds packets so I might grow my own corn, my own grapes, and other things. And it failed because all the chickens, all the livestock, pretty much they have community grazing. So you would have random cattle going through backyards and things. So it was an uphill battle.
To try to do something that would not have it be controlled. Like where you were a farmer and you were spending all your time doing that. That's really funny, kind of having just the random cattle down the street deciding to come through. Did you ever have any moments where you were really frightened or just had despair? Like, what am I doing? Why am I here? What have I gotten myself into? Moments that stood out.
I had some times where I almost felt kind of lost when I first got into the Peace Corps service, which I think the more I spent there, the more I learned my way around. It's kind of like when you come into a new city, you're trying to learn where the streets are, who are the points of contact, and that was something that Peace Corps really strove to help us learn early on. And so after the training was completed and I was sworn in, and I was my first few days in my community, I had to learn so much about when is the taxi going into Soroti so I could go and spend time out. I had to know those real quickly.
All of that into your, and that can be very overwhelming. I mean, I'm not surprised that you might have, I guess, even almost like a homesickness kind of feeling, because you have nothing that is familiar and nothing that's going to be catered to you. It's all, you have to learn everything and where you fit and how to take care of yourself. And that was just one thought for just briefly. I guess you were not there just isolated by yourself. There were other Peace Corps people within your community, so you actually had contacts, or were you kind of on your own and you'd only occasionally get to talk to Peace Corps?
Yeah, our Peace Corps volunteer service, when I was as a teacher, we actually kind of had different regional groups. So we'd have some who were like on the eastern region, some on the southwest side. So it varied, and so we would schedule it through social media, times that we could get and meet together.
I see. So you actually were kind of on your independent, and
Right,
then you
very
would have to
independent.
coordinate a chance to get to see each other and maybe talk about what you were experiencing.
Right.
Oh, then that would be very tough. I mean, and kind of daunting for anyone, to especially just being totally on their own at a young point in their life.
Right.
Okay. Well, then tell us about what obviously you get acclimated and comfortable. What did you do in your free time that stood out that you like to do?
I actually bought myself a mountain bike when I was in Uganda to get around, because it was all dirt paths to get to school and back. So sometimes when the weather was not too miserably hot and dry, I would go to the market on my mountain bike and like take my backpack and just stock up on things. But usually the weekends was when I did most of my things, going to Sorority and back. It was about 7,000 Ugandan shillings, which was about a little over $2 or so, to go into town to get like yogurt and little ice cream packs and things to kind of make me feel more home.
Yeah, okay. And so travel is travel kind of what you did? Your weekends were always on maybe small side trips here and there to experience things. Were there any local things that the students maybe did and that you saw as their pastimes? Things that they play, sports that they played, or something like that?
Yeah, we actually had a track and field in the back of our school, and I actually kind of helped coach later on. We had almost like Olympic sports where they throw, it's called short put and long jump and those kind of things. So the sports, especially soccer, is very popular in Uganda.
Right.
It's very
Yes,
big,
because you just need a ball and some sneakers, and you've got yourself. Then you can just set up boundaries and things, but you can play. Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, were you into soccer or anything like that? Did you ever?
I kind of interacted and kind of played along with it, even though I wasn't a professional, and I did some.
Got to be part of their fun time like that. Since you did a lot of travel, the Serengeti, were there other places that stood out as far as your travel, the adventures? Like the gorilla, the mountain gorilla, that was its own set trip, and then the Serengeti. Were there others that were easy trips or that stood out?
Most of the trips to any of the parks were quite some distance from where my site was, so I had to really plan around it. But I think Murchison Falls was probably the closest to my site, and also there was another place called Sippy Falls, which is kind of not too far from the border of Kenya, and a lot of volunteers we would meet, and they had like little bungalows, and so we'd get together there and have like a little parties. And sometimes when we had new Peace Corps volunteer groups come in, we would kind of meet them in that area to kind of integrate them into our group.
I guess the nature and exposure to that must have been just really like delightful. Especially, you mentioned being near Kenya, and so often people talk about going to see the large animals, in their natural. Did you do like a traditional safari? Was that something that was common, or you could get to, or is that something that would be much further away that wouldn't have been practical? Like, is a safari? I may be using it in the wrong way, but do you know what I mean? Like, where you go and you watch the animals and everything.
Yeah, actually, the safari we did in the Serengeti, we actually did have our own like pop-top van that we could get up and stand up and see the animals from the roof. And one of my Peace Corps volunteers was a very avid birder, and so she had like a running list of all the different species when we were going out on traveling and through the Serengeti. So it was great. And I kept journals, and that was one of the things I would recommend anyone going in the Peace Corps to keep record, because there's so many things you lose track of.
That you just kind of, it becomes the background, and you don't record it and know your experience and thoughts at the time. Yeah, that's a great point. That's excellent. Was there any animal that was just anything you saw that was really like powerful? Did you see the elephants, the lions, anything like that, or was it more smaller type hoof animals, grazing animals?
In the first safari I did about a year into my service in Murchison Falls, I actually saw almost all the large animals besides the lion. They had, as soon as you go on, you could see warthogs crossing the street. There were giraffes on the side. And you'd have to do it early in the morning, because during the midday they all try and seek shade. So you have to be time conscious.
Yeah, so it's you're right. You always say you have to do it on their time, because it would be very hot, and they're not going to be out doing that.
I was already hot enough as it was, and I can only imagine how.
I can imagine. I guess that's kind of a good point. Was there anything that you really missed about the U.S.? Like, was some things that stood out that you...
I really missed the warm showers, because everything, I had to get used to cold water and pretty much splashing myself with water. And
goodness, okay.
And the phone connectivity, I would call my parents frequently, but it was always spotty. I'd have to go a certain distance just so I could get a signal. It felt like one of those movies where it's like the protagonist is trying to wave their phone around frantically trying to get a signal.
To ring it. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, my goodness, and to say that about the like a cold shower, and to know that to know what the opposite of that is, or that you probably got used to it, but yet there was probably still that, or did you ever get used to it? I don't know, but wow, that must have been, in terms of, I can see where that would be a very powerful thing, is to always want that, and to know that you just could not, they just don't do things the way Western societies are kind of structured, right? To have hot water tanks and all that. That's just not part of their existence.
They don't have. My site wasn't even connected to an electric line, so most people would charge by solar panels. That was the predominant way I could do anything, and I ended up buying my own solar system when I was there, just so I could charge my phone and have a little bit more accessibility. And it was a good investment for the time I was there.
Yeah. Oh wow. So you kind of had to be independent and all of that. That's the part that's just amazing. You kind of just had to do it and make it work, as they say. What were the conditions of just the community in general, where you lived and for the students you taught?
So my classroom size was about 45 students or so. That was especially during the time that we had exams. Most of the students would be kind of off and on. A lot of them were boardings from that school that I was at. St. Francis Achumet was the school, and they all lived in almost kind of like bunk beds in very closer conditions. And the schools, of course, they didn't really have electricity, so everything was on the chalkboard. I had to write all my lesson objectives on the board and kind of keep track of all that.
Yeah. So you really do appreciate the things you have, the differences when you realize there are people who are dealing with so little.
Right.
And that they're trying to change their lives, and it's not easy.
And you can still actually be surprisingly get along without a lot of the supplies. We did have chemistry supplies. They were things that we were stocked with that were part of our lessons. Even though we didn't really have displays for giving PowerPoint slides or anything like that, we made do with what we had. And a lot of the teaching techniques that I learned during my training helped me kind of get comfortable being at the chalkboard and becoming a master of that.
Right. In some ways, that probably was a skill that that actually develops, that you see that you have to make something work, and you don't have that convenience, that you're flipping a switch and things are just all connecting together and everything's working, and that's probably a huge skill that probably is part of who you are now, that you've had to work with conditions and circumstances that were not easy at all, and you had to improvise. And now that's probably a very good quality, I bet. I mean, that maybe all Peace Corps people realize that they don't think about, maybe.
And for example, using that idea of using what supplies you have available, I actually had to teach about the different levels of soil. And at school, we were constructing some new pit latrines. And so there was an actual space, a big hole in the ground where all the soil was visible. So I walked all my students out, and I made that part of the lesson, was going out and using that as a tool. Yeah, that what's practically happening in life, they can use that and learn about it in a scientific matter. I guess one thing that just might be interesting for our audience would be just briefly, did you have to learn another language to do this? You mentioned Swahili. Was that something you had to become a little proficient in? There are over actually 50 languages in Uganda, different dialects. So it varies really depending on where you were placed. So the Peace Corps they informed us about where we were going based on our skills, and then we kind of learned after we were placed into our communities. And we had to actually pass a proficiency exam. And my language wasn't Swahili. It was a language called Ateso, which was a Nilotic language kind of on the eastern side between Kenya and Uganda. I see. So something that was... Well, I mean, Swahili or that language would be difficult, but wow. So you had to be somewhat proficient in order to exist with everyone. Yeah, and greeting in the language. The greeting was very easy in Ateso. It was yoga, which is like yoga, like the sport of stretching, that kind of thing. So that was easy for me to remember. And just saying thank you and some of those basic words really helped make people accept me more in a community. And learning the language is a lot of it's, depending on how much you use it, can really determine how well you integrate. Right, and you have to really work it and make yourself apply it. Well, this has been so interesting and so full. I guess is our kind of our ending thought for the program, since we're getting really close. If you had the opportunity, would you serve in the Peace Corps again, or at least? I mean, have you ever entertained possibly doing it again? Yes, I would, definitely. I thought that just my time spent in Africa and learning about the culture there, all the things that I gained as a teacher. And we actually, besides people out of college, we had a lot of retirees who also serve in Peace Corps. So besides the time that you have after can be spent serving out in the world. And I thought So actually retired people go back to and bring back what they had. So is that something you're thinking about? I mean, you might be a ways off from retirement, of course, but is that something I'm already contemplating just going back just for my personal travel. Just for a visit and to see everyone. That's really, that's wonderful. That would be exciting, and you would feel comfortable because you kind of understand the lay of the land and could see it differently then, not just from the beginning of being a volunteer in a totally new place. Oh, well, that is just really fascinating. I mean, this has just been I guess I wish we had more time that we could get into more things, but so I want to thank you for bringing your experience, and we appreciate it, and we certainly hope everyone joins us again for another episode of The Humanist Perspective. Thanks again. Thank you, Daniel.